Now, back when The Phantom Menace first came out, I remember how angry some fans were over the introduction of the Midi Chlorians. They absolutely hated this idea that perhaps some little microscopic organisms existing in all living cells across the galaxy were generating the Force, and that however many of these things you had in you determined how powerful you were with the Force. And if either of these two things were true, that the Force was just the result of bugs living in all our cells, and a simple blood test could begin to quantify the Force, then I'd absolutely agree that they were the worst thing George Lucas had ever put into Star Wars. Thankfully, neither of these assumptions were even close to accurate, though I can certainly understand why people thought this was the case when you consider what Yoda said in The Empire Strikes Back about how life creates the Force and makes it grow. So if there were these organisms called Midi Chlorians living in all cells that, as Qui-Gon Jinn says, are so important that life cannot exist without them, it stands to reason that they may very well be generating the Force itself. But the thing is, the Force almost certainly predates all life in the galaxy. In fact, it has to for everything to make sense. And when I said that very thing in another recent video of mine, people were quick to bring up the very same Yoda quote that I just did, that life creates the Force and makes it grow. So how could it have been there before life if life is what's generating it? Well, on the surface, this almost looks like a case of that old question, which came first, the chicken or the egg, only not exactly when you consider what really came first was the cosmic force, which is not the same thing as the living force that Yoda was speaking of in The Empire Strikes Back. In fact, the cosmic force has probably always just been. For a lack of a better way of putting it, it's the background energy of the entire universe, or existence itself. And the first life forms in the Star Wars galaxy were the Midi Chlorians, and they were created or came forth from this cosmic energy field or force, and then began generating the living force. And in time, different forms of life came about, though within all of them, within all their cells were midi-chlorians, these very first fundamental life forms. And the reason for this, the reason why life cannot exist without them, is because the midi-chlorians also act as a bridge between the cosmic force and living force, or a means by which for the background energy that has always been there to be a wellspring for the living force that is now constantly being generated since life came about. In other words, the midi-chlorians allow energy to come from the cosmic force so that it can make up the living force, which is comprised of each and every living organism. So when Yoda says life creates it and makes it grow, what he's saying is that life is drawing energy from the cosmic force to generate the living force, and it's the living force that the Jedi use and manipulate to do the incredible things they do. Furthermore, when Yoda says luminous beings we are, not this crude matter, what he's saying is we're just this energy that came from the cosmic force that is taking shape for a brief time so that it can experience existence before it returns to the cosmic force. And no, that's not a very poetic or romantic explanation for life, but it's the most basic and fundamental one in the Star Wars galaxy. Because when something dies, the energy that it was comprised of does indeed return to the cosmic force and helps in turn repower it, which means these two form, you guessed it, a symbiotic circle as they constantly replenish each other. And although this is purely speculation, I think it's safe to assume this cycle is crucial to the continued existence of the cosmic force itself, which explains why the cosmic force desires the living force to be in balance. And we know this is the case because what a Jedi does is to listen to the will of the cosmic force, spoken to them through the midi-chlorians, and then to carry out that will to keep the force in balance, or in a state where the cycle of life and death, or the constant replenishing of the cosmic force, continues unimpeded. And no, I'm not implying it's as simple as the cosmic force literally telling the Jedi to do this or that. I think it's a matter of trusting their instincts. If you listen to what Qui-Gon tells Anakin in The Phantom Menace, it's about quieting your own mind and basing your actions off feeling and not thought. And just to be clear here, I mean feelings in terms of what you sense, not feelings in terms of emotions, which is pretty much what the Sith do. And this is where I think a lot of people misunderstand the true purpose of the Jedi, and I've had many spirited, sometimes a bit heated, yet all in good fun debates with people on this very topic. Jedi are the very epitome of selflessness. They give up their lives in service of the Force, not in service of doing what is necessarily right and or just. Their one and only goal is to see to it that the Force is in balance, so that this cycle of life and death can continue, thus assuring the cosmic force is continually replenished, and hence it can continually replenish the living force, and life can continue indefinitely. It is the ultimate symbiotic relationship. And, like it or not, a Jedi will not or should not act in a way that may jeopardize this balance, even if it is to do something that we perceive to be morally right. However, more often than not, the will of the Force is going to fall in line with what we would deem morally right or beneficial to what living beings would consider the greater good. I mean, at first glance, a galaxy full of chaos, death, and destruction might seem desirable for the cosmic force, that it would constantly be replenished, but such a galaxy is not conducive to the continued existence of life. And the continued existence of life is, again, likely crucial in some respect to the continued existence of the cosmic force itself. So yes, a Jedi is likely almost always going to defend peace and justice in the galaxy, but not because that's inherently what they do. Rather, it's because such a state, a galaxy that is harmonious and symbiotic instead of parasitical in nature, is in the best interest of life continuing in a balanced way. The cosmic force wants the galaxy, or the living force, to be in a peaceful state free of war, tyranny, and oppression. And with this being the case, you might wonder how the Jedi could have so lost their ways that they would partake in the Clone Wars, or a galaxy-wide conflict. And there's actually two reasons for this, I believe. First, it's because they stopped trusting their feelings or listening to the will of the Force and started listening to the will of the Republic, who thought they knew what was best for the galaxy. And remember what Qui-Gon Jinn said, feel, don't think. Also, make no mistake, a Jedi will do whatever they must to achieve or maintain the balance. They will even seek out and destroy the Sith by any means necessary, which is likely what they thought they were doing by fighting in the Clone Wars. And I know it seems like this might fly in the face of what Yoda says to Luke in The Empire Strikes Back about using the Force for knowledge and defense, never attack. But stopping the Sith is defending life and the Force itself in the most basic way possible, because the Sith seeks unlimited or ultimate power at any cost. They care only about themselves and are the exact opposite of the Jedi, who only care about the greater good. They are the epitome of selfishness, because if left unchecked, they will destroy the balance and jeopardize the future of all life for their own personal gain. Lastly here, having a high midi-chlorian count is not why you are strong with the Force. Instead, it's likely that being strong with the Force is why you have a high midi-chlorian count in the first place. And basically, what I mean by that is the midi-chlorians themselves do have a consciousness, a collective one or something like a hive mind. In other words, every single midi-chlorian thinks as one, not individually. So it stands to reason that, on some level, they understand what their function and importance is, that they know that they have the responsibility of allowing those within the living force to hear the will or message of the cosmic force. And keeping this in mind, it makes sense that they would want this message to be heard by those with the power to do something about it, or those who are force sensitive. So if you're then already very strong with the Force, it makes sense that the midi-chlorians would congregate in your cells over the cells of someone who, even if they heard the will of the Force, couldn't do very much about it. And even though this does, in a way, begin to quantify or make measurable Force power or potential, the curious question becomes what the midi-chlorian counts of Sith are. Are they higher, lower, or about the same as their Jedi counterparts? And the reason I think they might actually be lower, and much lower, is that since they don't bother to listen to this message the midi-chlorians are trying to send, it could very well mean that the midi-chlorians either start to die off in their cells or abandon them until very, very few are left, or just enough to even survive. This could even begin to explain exactly how using the dark side tends to corrupt and slowly kill the user, since their selfish ways are causing the midi-chlorians, those life-providing organisms, to die off or abandon them en masse. And if this theory is true, a Sith might then have a much, much lower midi-chlorian count than even an average non-Force sensitive being. Either way, I think it's a fascinating question that will never ever get answered, because midi-chlorians are likely something you'll never hear brought up or discussed in the new canon again going forward, and that's because of the mistaken negativity around them, which is a real shame in my opinion. And though I'm someone who would of course love to know all the secrets of the Force someday, I'm also wise enough to realize that destroying all the mysticism around it with too many explanations or answers would likely destroy one of the best aspects of Star Wars, that being the awe, wonder, and mystery that is the Force. Nevertheless, I do like that George Lucas gave us in the prequels and then in the Clone Wars animated series at least some structure and basic principles of the Force, a groundwork of rules concerning how and why it works, though he still managed to leave us feeling like we've only scratched the surface of an even greater mystery. Well, that's all I've got for this time. Now it's your turn to tell me what you think about the Midi Chlorians. Is having learned about them in the first place too much, and Lucas should have never even began to explain the mysteries of the Force? Or are they something you really don't care about one way or the other? Or do you love the idea and wish we could learn more about the Force, even though once the curtain is pulled back and the mystery revealed, it has the potential to destroy the mysticism of Star Wars? Let me know in the comments below, and let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.